and welcome to this session on Beyond Section 21, what landlords and renters need to know about Section 8. So, for those of you who are joining for the first time, if you don't know me already, my name is Gareth. I am one of the trainers here at Society Matters, and I have the pleasure of taking you through this little session this afternoon. All right, and there is that lovely photo of me that I always say I love so much. I'm joking, I really hate that photo. I look like an absolute cheeseball, but hey, such is life. So, just in case this is your first time joining us, if I may just give you a little bit of background about myself and about us at Society Matters, kind of who we are and what we do. So Society Matters is the trading subsidiary of Citizens Advice Gateshead, actually one of the largest citizens advice in the country, but we are its trading subsidiary. So what I do day to day is we deliver a range of courses on various different kind of social welfare issues. So think housing, think immigration, think debt, think benefits, think financial well-being. It's citizens advice. So if you can think of it, then we probably cover it. And we try very much to feed the knowledge and the experience that we have as advisors on the front line, if you like, into sessions like this today. And on the screen there is just some of the organisations that we're very proud to support and to work alongside. So just very quickly before we get into things, just a quick bit of housekeeping if I may. If I can ask you to keep your microphones on mute just to avoid any kind of background noise, that is very much appreciated. In terms of breaks, we're not going to take a break because it's only a 1 hour session, so we will just be carrying straight on until the end. If you have any questions at any point, hopefully you can tell I'm about as intimidating as a cream egg. So if you have any questions at any point, please do feel free to just pop a message in the chat, take yourselves off mute, whatever you are more comfortable with. As I said, there will be time at the end for a Q&A. I will stop the recording beforehand as well, and we'll sort of chat privately. All right. Excuse me. So without further ado, we'll get into it then. So what are we going to be talking about for the next hour or so? So we're going to be talking about the key differences between Section 21 and Section 8 possession notices, because there are some quite fundamental reforms coming in very soon. We are going to talk about the most common Section 8 grounds used by landlords. We're going to talk about how the end of Section 21, those no-fault eviction notices, changes the housing landscape. I would argue it's the biggest change to the housing landscape that we've had in, I would say, decades. We're going to talk about the evidence and the legal thresholds required for Section 8 notices, and we're going to talk about and give you some insight into how tenants and advisors can respond to that possession action as well. All right. So apologies, I've just got people in the waiting room. No. So before we get into things, I am just curious, folks. What do you think about the sort of the landscape of housing in this country at the moment in terms of private renters specifically? Do you want to just take yourselves off mute, pop a message in the chat, whatever's easier. Alicia, oh, that is bull talk, Alicia. Horrific. Okay, so I'm going to pick on you if I may. What's horrific about it? If it's easier, feel free to just take yourself off mute.
Yeah, hiya everyone. So horrific in the way that I only work with women who are, well, who have had multiple disadvantages. So say, for example, the homeless, mental health, prison leavers, people on probation, substance misuse. They quite often don't have a guarantor. They quite often don't have good credit. They obviously don't have access to, quite a lot of money to put down as a deposit. They're not working, things like that. And to try and find suitable, sustainable accommodation for these people is really, really difficult. So yeah, for me, horrific.
Horrific. Okay. Well,
Horrific.
you know what? At least you can back up what you're saying there.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah. It's difficult to put a slightly more positive spin on it, if I may. It is challenging, especially when you're dealing with people with those sort of extenuating circumstances as well. It's hard enough trying to find a private rented property as it is. When you're dealing with all those additional barriers on top, it just all sort of compounds on each other. Moriam, I hope I'm saying your name there correctly, sorry. You're saying it's really unfair and expensive. What's unfair about it?
I think often we find that the landlords don't often follow the right procedures, and it causes them a lot of distress and grief. And it sort of seems to be, like the rules kind of apply one way, unfortunately. Even if, exploitative is absolutely fair as well. And of course, renting is, especially private renting, is incredibly expensive for a lot of our
Yeah.
clients, and
Yeah.
with the limitations that they get with any sort of benefits support
Where
as
are you?
well.
Where are you joining us from, if you don't mind me asking, Maria?
I'm joining from Birmingham today.
Oh, sorry, I meant like which organisation. Sorry,
Oh,
should have been more
right, sorry.
specific there.
Yes, I'm joining from Citizens Advice.
Oh, lovely.
Citizens
Oh,
Advice, yeah.
you're one of the family. Oh, lovely, lovely.
Yes, yeah, very
Yeah,
much so.
right. Yeah. So, thank you very much for that, guys. It's always nice to hear people's experiences and thoughts as well. And please do feel free to chip in. So, just to give you an idea of where we stand at this moment of time in time, just to sort of to give us some context, if I may. So, there is a lovely little graph on the screen there that you can see that shows that the number of people that are being continually forced out of their homes after they receive a Section 21 eviction. So you can see that, yes, it dipped quite significantly during COVID because of the COVID eviction ban. It then went up, came down again, and we've been on a pretty steady upwards trajectory ever since. Now, just to give you some context, like I said, 2024 alone, there were 32,000 Section 21 eviction notices. So for anyone not aware, Section 21 eviction, that is an eviction that a no-fault eviction, where your landlord doesn't really need a reason to evict you. As long as they follow the correct process, then that's that. I'm afraid you are out. Now, excuse me. Around 11,400 households were physically evicted by bailiffs following Section 21 proceedings in a single year. If you break it down, that is about 31 households per day. Sorry. That is about 31 households per day. Now, that figure actually comes from statutory homelessness statistics because local authorities have to record one is threatened with homelessness within 56 days. And Section 21 notices are a major trigger for this duty. So if you look at this figure of 6,640 households threatened with homelessness due to a Section 21 notice in just one quarter, that is one quarter of the year. The annual figure is going to be much, much higher than that. Now, that had a significant effect on council property stock, which, you know, I'm sure I don't need to tell you guys, is already at breaking point, and so many people, excuse me, and record levels of families with children who are living in temporary accommodation are being moved out of the area. 70% of landlords who evicted a tenant reported using a Section 21 notice, as compared to 26% using a Section 8. Now, what does that mean in practice? Now, that data, first and foremost, that statistics, that comes from a big survey called the English Private Landlord Survey. Sorry, I've just got some people in the waiting room there. To apologize. Let me in. Apologies. That figure actually comes from the English Private Landlord Survey. Now, what that means in practice is that Section 21 has historically been, you know, the dominant eviction route. Section 8 is used much less frequently. Why? Well, quite simply, Section 21, like I said, doesn't require evidence. It was quicker. In a lot of cases, it avoided court hearings altogether. Like we said, research shows that 70% of landlords who evicted a tenant used a Section 21 notice. That doesn't mean, now Section 21, I should say, is being abolished altogether come the 1st of May. That means that moving forward, landlords are going to need to use Section 8 instead. They're going to need to give a reason and prove that reason. Do you think that abolishing Section 21, do you think it's a positive or a negative? Do you think it's a bit of both? What's your thoughts?
I think it's a negative.
Okay, you think it's a negative? Why is that?
Yeah. I had a really bad experience with the tenant who turned out to be on benefits, didn't want to pay rent, this and that. And I found out that with the Section 21, it was a lot easier than with Section 8.
Right. In terms of like the process of it, because you didn't have to
Yes, it was
yeah.
much quicker. I think it was a lot quicker than it would have been with Section 8. So it depends when you have a good landlord or when you have a good tenant that's really good, but sometimes you just meet the wrong people. So of course I understand that it's also good for the tenants, because then you have a life in the house of somebody else, but still that's where you live, that's where your house is, that's where your
Yeah.
home is, and then you're being kicked out for no reason. But then sometimes it's just really necessary.
Yeah, and that's no, I can totally sympathise, and I think that's the difficult balancing act that the government kind of face with this, because on the one hand, we've got tenants saying that we want, or tenants rights organisations saying that tenants should have stronger protections against evictions, and then on the other hand, you've got landlords saying that actually being able to use the Section 21 eviction was useful in those circumstances because it was quicker. And if we regulate the market too much, then ultimately landlords will just leave. And so it's trying to sort of balance those two competing demands that they're trying to do, certainly. Anyone else? Do you think it's a good thing what the government are doing around Section 21? Do you think it's a positive? Do you think it's been poorly thought through? What do we think?
I think it's a good thing in the private rented sector. I think it really strengthens tenants' rights and things like that. What I think is that there needs to be more thought around services and temporary support services and housing accommodation, because actually, just like the lady just said, it's really difficult when you then faced as an organisation with somebody who has massively overstayed within a temporary period of say 6 to 12 months, that it's a temporary support and accommodation, and they've been there 4 years with no intention of moving on. It's very, very difficult, because then that's taking up support services for homeless people, and you have this big clump and this big thing at the end, which is really difficult and goes alongside sort of the changes to tenancy types and contracts. So it really does have a massive impact on supported accommodation.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. I used to work in supported accommodation, so I'm with you there. Paula, I can see you've got your hand up there. Sorry, very polite, by the way. Do apologise, you've been waiting.
You're all right. I think it is a very, very complex thing, and I don't think it's so black and white as the law would suggest that it is, as previous speakers have already alluded to. I think what it's going to do, though, is push individual private landlords, who are the ones that do care, out of the system altogether, and put loads of businesses in there who have the money and the resources and the legal wherewithal to be able to just use Section 8 as anybody would use Section 21 right now. So I don't think that it's been thought through effectively enough.
Yeah, no, I do think there's an argument for that, and actually, you've brought me quite nicely onto my next point there. One of the consequences that we are seeing is this idea of some landlords quite simply just leaving the market because of the changes that they are facing. There are various surveys that suggest that somewhere between about a quarter and a third of landlords have recently sold properties or are planning to reduce their portfolios because of the uncertainty, the cost, the regulation that's coming in. Now, that suggests that landlords selling properties is becoming one of the most common reasons that tenancies end. Now, that's significant, because even if Section 21 disappears, landlords can still seek possession to sell property under Section 8 grounds. But yes, that comes with more sort of evidentiary. It's a more complex, it's a longer system compared to Section 21. I mean, 35% of landlords have sold or attempted to sell property in the last year. Rising mortgage costs, regulation impacting landlords. About 290,000 homes, it's estimated, have left the private rented sector. That just puts even more pressure on local authority housing, which just creates more pressure, more stretched services that are left trying to cope with that demand. Now, like I said, about 35% of landlords have sold or attempted to sell property in the last year. Now, that figure, I will say that figure comes from the National Residential Landlords Association and some property sector research reports. It is a trend But as I said, it's not an exact number, but we estimate around 290,000 homes have left the private rented sector because of this uncertainty. And landlords themselves are dealing with higher mortgage interest rates, increased regulation, reforms through the Renters Reforms Bill. Why would they want to stay? Is the argument, at least. Like we said, that creates tension in this debate about housing, because tenant organisations want greater security, but landlords then argue that regulation and so on just reduce that rental supply. Does anyone have any questions about anything at all? No? Okay. So then, what was a Section 21, a no-fault eviction? So it was introduced through the Housing Act of 1988, and it allowed landlords to regain possession without proving any fault on the tenant's part. Now that meant that landlords, they didn't need to show rent arrears or antisocial behaviour or tenancy breaches, whatever it might be. They just need to serve a valid notice. Now the notice had to meet certain requirements, so they had to have given the correct notice period, they had to have protected the deposit, they had to have provided the correct documents. Think your gas safety certificates, your energy performance certificates, your how to rent guides. Now, even despite those requirements, it was still generally much simpler than a Section 8. But if Section 21 was so easy in theory, why is it being abolished? Well, there's a couple of reasons. Housing campaign groups have long argued that Section 21 just allows tenants to be removed without wrongdoing. There were real concerns about housing insecurity, because as long as your landlord follows the correct process, then that's that. You're out, I'm afraid. So housing insecurity, retaliatory evictions, rising homelessness. So the government has proposed abolishing Section 21 as part of wider private rented sector reforms. Now, these reforms, they aim to give tenants more security while still allowing landlords to regain possession where what they call legitimate reasons exist. And that is where Section 8 is going to become so much more important. So, Section 8 then is an alternative eviction route that is already available, but it works very differently from a Section 21. So with a Section 8, landlords have to rely on specific legal grounds to regain possession. So it could be rent arrears, it could be antisocial behaviour, it could be a breach of the tenancy agreement, it could be the landlord needs to move into the property, and the courts then decide whether possession should be granted. So in comparison to Section 21, Section 8 is more evidence-based and very often more complex. Out of curiosity, what do you think, what is your experience of Section 8 versus Section 21 evictions? Do you think it is more complex? Do you think it's fit for purpose? Do you think it needs reform? They're going to become more important as Section 21 is abolished. So what do you think? Do you think a Section 8 is the correct process if that's what we're going to have to, if that's what landlords are going to be relying on in future? Like I said, do you think it's fit for purpose?
I think
Or
it's
sorry.
better than, sorry. Yeah, I think it's better than nothing. Section 8.
Okay.
It does provide
Ring an endorsement there. I like it.
I mean, it's good, as I said before, it's good for the tenants, because then they have to be, they have to be at fault in order to be removed.
Yeah.
Which is, of course, totally understandable, because some people have children and, they live in a place and they have the children registered in the school. And imagine you getting a Section 21 and then you have to leave, and, the whole life is changing. It's really hard. Must be really hard for people with kids. I have cats, and I know that it would be a nightmare to go find somewhere to live with 4 cats. But on the other hand, it's really slow. I mean, the court is taking a lot of time to reply. And then when you do get the tenant out, you have to find them again. You have to spend money on
Yeah.
finding their new residence and then
Money,
enforce
time.
the judgment on the payments in case, you know, they have accrued, I mean, they owe you money.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my concern with things like Section 8, because Section 8 does typically take longer because you've got that sort of need for evidence and being able to prove the grounds, what effect is that going to have on things like in court backlogs, for example? Are we going to be in a position in a couple of years' time where there are significant court backlogs as a result of these Section 8 evictions instead, where previously, whether you can argue whether it was a positive or a negative, Section 21 was at least quicker. Paula, I can just see you saying there, sorry, again, for those larger landlords who have legal teams behind them, it's no more complicated. Okay, so yeah, maybe it depends on the landlord themselves. It might just be somebody who has one home versus, as we said, a larger organization, the resources that they have available. And then, sorry, I can see someone's got the hand up there.
Yes. So I think it's difficult to really sort of say, just because I think landlords have often tended to use that Section 21 to sort of see it play out en masse. I think will be interesting. But in theory, perhaps there are things about it that I think are quite positive in terms of giving clients a bit more transparency around why it is that they're being asked to leave.
Yeah.
But I also do appreciate that for the smaller landlords, or the you know, perhaps the landlord who only has one property that they're managing, it can seem like quite a daunting thing to try and navigate. But hopefully there'll be support available. But I think in terms of the reality is, I think the renting market and the landscape is changing quite significantly. There are a lot of larger landlords, there are lots of companies and things like that, and they are, I think, a bit more well versed in these things. But it just it's again something that they don't often use, just because it's easier to sort of issue in Section 21. So I'm personally really sort of interested to see how it all plays out. But I'm optimistic at the moment, perhaps delusionally. We'll sort of see how it plays out. But yeah, hopefully we are able to iron things out as well, as and when.
Yeah, absolutely.
With time, eventually. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like you say, with Section 8, it does afford tenants greater transparency in terms of why they're being evicted, and, you know, being able to actually potentially, in some circumstances at least, challenge it. Compared to Section 21, like we said, I am curious to see what the longer term impact of that is going to be, certainly. So, yeah, cautiously optimistic myself. I wouldn't go quite as far as delusional, but hey ho.
I think I've got to be delusional. I think I really just have to be delusional. So, yeah.
Oh, I'm sure that's not true.
Yeah.
Right. So when it comes to a Section 8 notice, then, like we said, it is more evidence-based, it is more complicated than a Section 21, because with a Section 8 notice, the landlord will need to show the grounds for possession and will need to prove it. Now, there are various grounds for possession. I am not going to run through every single one of them because, frankly, we'd be here for much longer than an hour. But there are various grounds for possession. But we have this idea of mandatory versus discretionary grounds for possession. So mandatory grounds mean that if the landlord proves the ground, the court has to grant possession. So the most common example would be rent arrears, for instance. But then we have discretionary grounds. Now, discretionary grounds typically give judges more sort of flexibility. So the court will look at things like the circumstances of the tenant, the seriousness of the breach, you know, was it the first time, was it a repeat instance, the proportionality of it, and that judicial discretion is one of the reasons that Section 8 can, in practice, take longer. Now, with possession grounds themselves, as I said, I'm not going to run through every single one because there's quite a number and we just don't have time. But for example, it can be things like rent arrears. So rent arrears are one of the most common reasons that landlords pursue possession. Possessions for rent arrears, I will say, have soared, particularly since the cost of living crisis. It could be antisocial behaviour. Now, I will say antisocial behaviour can allow for much faster possession in some circumstances. There has been talk about housing reforms, about new grounds where landlords might seek possession if they want to sell the property or move into it themselves. Those changes ultimately, they're about balancing the security of the tenant with landlord's rights, sorry. And I think that is what's in a constant conflict anytime the government tries to make any kind of serious reform around housing rights. It's this constant dichotomy of how do we give people more certainty and more security in a way that doesn't then impact on the landlord's obligations and wanting to continue to provide that property. So in practice then, what does all this mean for tenants? Now, I'm not saying for a second that because we've got rid of Section 21 that, there'll just be no evictions anymore, all right? It's not going to work like that. Tenants might have greater security because, like we said, there'll be no fault evictions anymore, but they can still lose their homes if legal grounds are proven. The key difference is things like greater scrutiny through the courts, like we just talked about earlier. The tenant actually understanding why it is that they are potentially being evicted and perhaps being able to challenge it. Landlords needing to give evidence and, like we said, more opportunity for them to challenge it through the courts, the tenants, that is. As we've talked about, the court system might face increased pressure because more cases will rely on Section 8, which will take more time, as we've talked about. On the flip side of the coin, what does this mean for landlords? Well, in practice, it means that landlords are going to need to be more careful with things like record keeping. So keeping rent payment histories. It might be keeping records of communication with tenants. It might be keeping evidence of tenancy breaches. Possession cases, they might take longer because of, again, court backlogs, because of the evidentiary requirements, because of the discretionary decisions. That is one reason why some landlords are concerned about these reforms. Is that a fair criticism, do you think? The reason I ask is there's a sort of perception, personally, I think at least, whenever the government try to introduce new obligations, for example, on landlords, that the default response almost seems to be from various organisations, this will just drive people out. You are making it harder for people. Now, on the flip side of the coin, compared to other countries, we actually have quite weak tenant security rights in some respects. So when we talk about these challenges and the impact it's going to have on landlords, do you think that's a fair criticism?
There's always two sides to every story.
Two sides to every. Oh, that's very diplomatic. I like it. I like it. Miriam, you've got your hand up there. Sorry.
I think, whilst I completely agree, there are definitely two sides to every story. We never want to sort of prevent people who are great landlords from leaving the market, but also I think it's important that we try and sort of make sure that both of those sides are a little bit more equal. The tenant rights that we have in place at the moment, as you said, are comparatively not as strong, and I think that's caused a lot of issues, a lot of difficulty, and in my opinion, perhaps needlessly. So I think we'd only be better for having stronger tenant rights, making sure that the people and the sort of organizations or companies that can be good landlords are good landlords, and those who are not good landlords are having to sort of,
Yeah,
like,
yeah. Again, it's
yeah.
it's that struggle of trying to protect tenants as much as we can without unduly putting off landlords from wanting to be landlords, be in the market essentially, while at the same time making sure that we're protecting tenants enough that we are protecting them from, for want of a better phrase, rogue landlords, and trying to balance that is something I think the government are struggling with generally, personally at least, I would say. Anyone else? Oh, Suzanne, you've got your hand up there, sorry. You're very polite, guys. I like it. I like it. You can just take yourselves off mute and shout. We're not in school. It's fine. No, I'm kidding. You've got your hand up there. Sorry, Suzanne. Sorry, were you going to say something there, Suzanne? Can't seem to hear you if you're saying. I don't know if you maybe want to try popping it in the chat instead, Suzanne, if that's easier. I can't seem to hear you. No? Right. If it's easier, feel free to just pop your message in the chat and I'll keep an eye out for it. But for some reason, I can't seem to hear you. All right. Apologies there. I'm not sure what's happened there. Anyone else? Do you think these reforms do a good job of trying to balance? Ooh. Hello? No? Sorry. Do you think these reforms do a good job of trying to balance the sort of tenant security versus landlords' obligations and so on? Oh, no problem, Suzanne. I thought it might be the case. If it's easier, feel free to just pop it in the chat. Respect works both ways. Yeah, that's the rub, isn't it? Respect works both ways. It does. I mean, for all that we talk of these reforms and the obligations going to place on landlords, I mean, you'll see in newspapers and so on, they'll always talk about the stories where things like Section 21 was really good because it meant that I could get rid of this awful tenant quickly, for example. But yeah, when entering into an agreement, the renter knows it is not forever. If I may, Suzanne, I'm going to be a little bit controversial here and say I'm not sure I quite agree with that. There is research that shows that older people now are renting later and later into life because they are finding it increasingly difficult to find or to purchase a home. Who's to say that home they don't want it to be forever? They don't want it to be long term? I'm just playing devil's avocado. Not for private landlords who only have one. Okay, okay. Janet, you've got your hand up there, sorry.
Yeah, hello. I mean,
Hello.
we work with a lot of people who are going through eviction processes, and I think it's a positive that tenants have stronger rights. But I do think as a standalone, it's not going to solve the social housing crisis. I think if anything, if there's less private rentals, then if landlords leave the market,
Yeah,
we may
supply and
end up with
demand.
higher
Yeah.
rents, people not being able to afford private rentals, and place more pressure on social housing. So I think this as a standalone is not going to solve the problem. I think they can't get away from the need to invest in social housing.
I completely agree. You are preaching to the converted, I promise. It's all well and good saying that, we are going to introduce these reforms that give people more security. But actually, if it does just drive landlords out of the market, then as you say, that reduces supply, that increases demand, rents go up yet further. They've already risen significantly in the last few years. People are struggling with rent as it is. How will they cope with that increased rent? Well, it probably won't. Like you say, they could end up homeless. They go to the local authority for homeless assistance. They end up in temporary accommodation or trying to find a council property, maybe waiting however long it might be. And then, yeah, I'm completely with you. Miriam, personally, I think it's important we introduce rent controls. I think I could be wrong here, don't quote me on this, but I'm sure I remember seeing something about Sadiq Khan in London wanting to introduce rent controls, but please don't quote me on that. But I've got it in the back of my head for some reason. But I would be very curious to see how something like that would work in practice. I know it works very successfully in places like Germany. Germany actually has much stronger tenant rights than we do, for instance. So I would be curious. Right. So what can we do if we are supporting tenants facing eviction? So advice is essential. And of course, I would say that I work for Citizens Advice. Oh, the London Renters Union has been pushing it for a while. Oh, that might have been where I heard it, Maureen. Thank you. It was bugging me in the back of my head. I'll have to dig it out later. So, what can we do if we are supporting tenants facing eviction? Like I said, advice is essential. So, think about, is the notice actually valid? Right? Was the correct process followed? Has their deposit been protected, and so on? Which Section 8 ground is being used? What evidence have they got, or have we got, to counter-argue that? Now, tenants themselves might need support with accessing housing advice services, whether that's places like Citizens Advice or Shelter or whoever it might be. It could be support with homelessness applications if they do find themselves at risk of being homeless. It could be debt advice as well, where potentially rent arrears are involved. Now, in terms of the key messages, the key takeaways from today, all right. Firstly, Section 21 is being abolished as of the 1st of May. It is, I would argue, one of the biggest changes in terms of the housing landscape that we have seen in decades. That means that Section 8 will become the main eviction route for tenants to evict. For landlords to evict tenants, sorry. That possession will require legal grounds. They will need to be able to prove that, and understanding that system is going to be critical. Fundamentally, eviction law, for want of a better phrase, is moving from a simple notice system, so where you got your Section 21 notice, and as long as they followed the correct process, I'm afraid that was that, it is going to become a much more evidence-based, a much more legal, I would say more complex, potentially more lengthy process that's going to affect tenants, landlords, maybe us as advisors, local authorities, whoever it might be. Understanding things like Section 8 is going to be hugely important. So, as we come towards the end of the session then, I do just want to take a moment to talk about some training that actually we're very proud to offer at Society Matters. Firstly, we have a full CPD accredited course on what we call housing and homelessness, if you would like to find out more. This is actually one of our flagship full-day courses designed for professionals supporting people experiencing housing difficulties. So you will learn to understand, for example, the legal framework of housing and homelessness, tenancy types, eviction processes, landlord and tenant rights and how they have changed in the face of these changes that we've just been talking about today, recognising the eviction processes for Section 8, supporting people through homelessness applications. Sorry, I can't talk. The course is CPD accredited, and it is very much based, again, on the experience that we have as advisors. Now, separately to that, I will say we are also very proud to offer, we've just recently launched a new full-day course as well, also CPD accredited, specifically looking at supporting people with homelessness applications. So as in, quite simply, the process of how do I make a homelessness application? What duties do councils have under homelessness legislation? How does the concept of priority need and vulnerability fit within those assessments? This idea of gatekeeping. You know, I've had so many clients in the past where they will get in touch to say that they went to, I won't name names, but they went to particular organisations and were told, no, sorry, we can't help you. And I know for a fact that they are wrong, but that person does not know that. So what can we do? How do we challenge that? Again, it's all based on the experience that we have as advisors. Now, this would, I would say, be particularly useful for any organisation that is working with people facing eviction, domestic abuse survivors, people leaving institutions like prison or hospital. There is a lovely little training booklet that I will send out to you. Unfortunately, I don't seem to have permission to be able to drop it in the chat, which is very strange because I did before. But what I'll do is when I send out the recording for this session, I will make sure you get a copy of that booklet as well, if you would like to find out more information about any of our courses. All right. Just to say, if you want to find out a little bit more, our next session So we run a free webinar every month. Our next session will be particularly on what we call We Can't Help You, challenging homelessness in homelessness gatekeeping.